Okay, when Gulliver begins his travels for part 3 of Gulliver's Travels, his ship that he's on is attacked by pirates, and he ends up stranded on an island with only 4 days worth of food. He creates a camp on this island, and he discovers a floating landmass above him. And he calls for their help, and they send down a chain for him to climb up. And then he notices that they're all very odd looking, and they look like this. Okay, so they always tilt their head to the side, and they have one eyeball looking up and one looking inward. And then they have shirts that have stuff like this on them. They have musical instruments, so I'm going to try my hand at a trumpet here. It's going to look awful. It's got 3 valves though, so that part's good. And then a mouthpiece. Okay. And then also they have celestial bodies on them. And that's like the sun, the moon, and the stars. And that's a religious thing, basically, to represent the Trinity. And so I'm going to draw her a head so she's not just a dress. Alright. And now, he doesn't speak their language. And so the king gets him a teacher so that he can learn the language. And basically he finds out that their language is mainly music and math based. And so they also like to learn a lot about astrology, which is why they wear celestial bodies on their clothing. And it goes to tell how the lodestone holds laputa in its place. It's a magnetic force that is only strong enough to hold when there's a landmass below it. And so there's only one landmass it can't go above, and it's only because they threatened to overtake laputa because the king was so mean to them. Like, he likes to hover above their land and cover up the sun, and that way they can't cultivate their crops and blocks the rain. And so Gulliver, he feels really out of place because he's around all of these smart people. And he gets a friend to petition the king so he can leave the island. And so when he gets permission to, they drop him off on a mountaintop where he meets Minotti. And he begins to tell some of the history of laputa. So he goes into detail about how the people of laputa, they have these ideas about math and astrology, and they want to make a school to where they can study it. And so they come down off of the island and onto the mainland, and they build an academy where they can study all of these things. And then Minotti influences Gulliver to go and find out what the academy is all about. And so when he goes, he's like, none of these ideas make sense, because one of them was like, start building a house from the roof all the way down to the foundation. And he realizes that all these ideas are pretty ridiculous, but then he decides that he's ready to go back to England. Well, this all relates back to Jonathan Swift because he was an Irish writer. Gulliver's Travels was written to satirize the Whig Party of England. He uses slang such as laputa, which means the whore in Spanish. And so this was obvious that he wanted people that were educated to understand that he was making fun of something. And so, inadvertently, he was making fun of England. And it was obvious that Laputa was supposed to resemble England because it had control of the other countries and when they could cultivate and when they couldn't. And so they used that to their advantage. And then England misused the knowledge that they had, which is why he makes fun of the people of Laputa. And they misused their knowledge by making separate parties when he didn't like that idea, obviously. And he used satire by making the people be smart, but they look really dumb because they have their eyes going in different ways and they're tilting their head. And it was an allegory to the Irish Revolt, and that was symbolized by the small city that was threatening to overtake Laputa, because that's what the Irish people did to England, because they were so overbearing and they didn't deserve to have all of that control. But that is the end of my part of the presentation.
3.